I was elbow deep in fixing our ERP system when Michael Hartwell walked in and said his son needed my office. 13 years I'd been keeping his company from falling apart, and he delivered the news like he was asking me to move a coffee mug. "Hey Bob," he said, not even looking up from his phone. "Quick thing, Austin starts Monday. He'll need your office." Just like that. No discussion, no warning, nothing. Austin, that's his 25-year-old son who just got his MBA and thinks he knows everything about running a business because he has 50,000 followers on LinkedIn. I'm Bob McKenzie, by the way, 47 years old, been running systems at Hartwell Industrial Solutions since I got out of the Army. Back then, I was a logistics specialist at Fort Campbell, managing supply chains for entire battalions. When you're responsible for making sure 3,000 soldiers have what they need when they need it, you learn a thing or two about keeping systems running smooth. That military training stuck with me. In the Army, we had a saying, prior planning prevents poor performance. Everything I built at Hartwell came from that mindset. When I started here in 2010, their systems were held together with duct tape and prayer. Their ERP software was from 1998, their vendor management was a bunch of Excel sheets, and their compliance reporting was whatever someone remembered to file before the deadline. I spent my first 2 years just understanding how this place worked. Hartwell makes industrial components, gears, bearings, hydraulic parts for heavy machinery. 200 employees, mostly good people who knew their trades but didn't know much about computers. That's where I came in. See, the thing about manufacturing is everything connects to everything else. You can't just swap out one system without affecting 3 others. So I built it all custom, wrote scripts that connected our ancient ERP to the vendor portals, created automated alerts when inventory dropped below safety levels, built manual overrides for when suppliers changed their data formats, which happened about every 6 months. The compliance stuff alone was a nightmare. Manufacturing companies like ours have to report to OSHA, EPA, state safety boards, and half a dozen other agencies. Miss a filing deadline or submit wrong data and they'll shut you down faster than you can say environmental violation. I created a whole system that tracked every requirement, every deadline, every form that needed filing. Took me 3 years to get it right. By 2015, Hartwell was running like a Swiss watch. Vendors loved working with us because payments went through smooth, orders were accurate, and someone always answered their calls. That someone was usually me, because I'd built relationships with these people. Jim at Midwest Steel knew he could call me directly when there was a problem. Sarah at Hydraulic Supply would email me personally when they had surplus inventory we could get at discount. Michael Hartwell never saw any of this. To him, the company just worked. Orders got filled, reports got filed, vendors got paid. He figured it was all automated, that modern computers could handle anything. What he didn't realize was that behind every automated process was about 100 hours of custom coding and another 50 hours of manual maintenance, like our vendor payment system. On paper, it looked simple. Purchase order comes in, goods get delivered, invoice gets processed, payment goes out. In reality, our ERP couldn't talk to half our vendors' systems. Invoice formats changed constantly. Delivery confirmations came in by email, fax, phone, and sometimes handwritten notes from truck drivers. I had to manually verify every single transaction to make sure the numbers matched. The steel supplier alone had 3 different invoice formats depending on whether you ordered standard stock, custom fabrication, or rush delivery. Their system generated PO numbers that didn't match ours, so I built a lookup table to cross-reference them. When they switched accounting software in 2018, I spent 2 weeks rebuilding the whole integration. Austin didn't know any of this existed. To him, I was just some old guy who sat in an office and typed on a computer. He probably figured he could do the same thing, maybe faster since he grew up with technology. Michael stood there in my office like he'd just solved world hunger. Finally looked up from his phone, seemed surprised I wasn't putting up a fight. "Of course," I said. "That's it. Just, of course." He nodded once and walked out, probably thinking he'd handled that real smooth. I sat there for about 20 minutes, looking around the office that had been my command center for over a decade. My Army certificate hung next to 3 safety awards our division had won under my watch. The whiteboard where I tracked vendor delivery schedules. The second monitor where I kept all the compliance dashboards running. You know what? Fine. I packed up 3 things. My travel mug with the fading company logo, my notebook with 13 years of passwords and vendor contacts, and the flash drive that contained every script, every automation sequence, every manual override that kept this place running. Everything else, The dual monitors, the ergonomic chair Austin would probably replace with some gaming setup, the little plant that somehow survived in the fluorescent lighting. I left it all for him to figure out. Before I walked out, I sent Pat Coleman in HR a simple email. Transitioning to remote work temporarily while office reshuffling occurs, available via email as needed. Then I got in my truck and drove home. Didn't look back once. Monday morning rolled around and I watched from my kitchen table as Austin posted his first day at the office. Kid brought a ring light to a manufacturing facility, posted it on Instagram with some caption about bringing fresh energy to old school industry. I nearly choked on my coffee. The thing is, nobody really knew what I did all day. They just knew that when vendors called with problems, I handled it. When the compliance software glitched during audit season, it got fixed. When our biggest client needed rush orders processed through the system, it happened. They figured it was all automated, that computers just did their thing. What they didn't know was that I'd spent 13 years building a custom ecosystem that looked automated but actually required constant human intervention. Like our daily operations report that went out every Tuesday at 8:15 a.m. sharp. Austin probably thought it generated itself. Truth was, I pulled data from 5 different systems, cross-referenced it with delivery schedules, manually adjusted for the seasonal fluctuations our software couldn't predict, and formatted it so the management team could actually understand what they were looking at. First red flag came on Tuesday morning. That operations report didn't go out. Austin sent an email asking where it was, copying half the management team like he was already taking charge. I watched him scramble for about an hour before he finally called the IT department. Poor Gary in IT spent 3 hours explaining that there was no automatic report generator, that Bob McKenzie had been creating it manually all these years. I ignored Austin's follow-up emails, made myself another cup of coffee, and started working on something more interesting, my consulting business plan. See, back in the Army, we called it institutional knowledge, the stuff that doesn't get written down in manuals because it's too specific, too situational, or changes too often to document. Every unit has guys like me who carry that knowledge in their heads. Lose those guys without proper transition, and the whole operation falls apart. That's exactly what was happening at Hartwell, and I was watching it from my kitchen table with a front row seat. By Wednesday, the first compliance issue hit. State Safety Board sent a routine inspection notice, standard stuff that needed a response within 48 hours. Usually took me about 20 minutes to pull the right reports, verify the safety protocol updates, and submit the response. This time, Austin spent the whole day trying to figure out which forms to file and which safety protocols they were even asking about. He called me Thursday morning. "Bob, hey, quick question about the safety compliance thing. Where do we keep those protocols?" "I'm unavailable," I told him. "Right, but this is kind of urgent. State inspector is asking about our chemical storage procedures and I can't find the documentation." "Those would be in the compliance database, password protected. Manual updates required monthly." Long pause. "What's the password?" "I work on retainer now. $150 per hour, 3-month minimum commitment." Another pause. Longer this time. I'll get back to you." He never did. By Friday, things were getting interesting. Midwest Steel, our biggest supplier, flagged a delivery discrepancy. Their invoice showed 500 units of bearing assemblies delivered, but our system only showed 450 received. Simple data entry error happens all the time. Normally, I'd cross-check the delivery receipt, verify the physical count with our warehouse manager, and adjust the system within an hour. Austin spent the entire day on it, called the warehouse 3 times, emailed the vendor twice, and finally just approved the invoice without verifying anything. Problem was, we actually had received all 500 units. The warehouse guy had entered them under the wrong product code. So now our inventory was off, our accounting was wrong, and we just paid for 50 units we couldn't locate in the system. That's when Jim at Midwest Steel called me directly. "Bob, what's going on over there? Kid doesn't seem to know how your receiving process works. Should I be talking to someone else?" "I'm freelancing now, Jim. If Hartwell wants me to handle vendor relations, they know my rates." "Freelancing? Hell, you should have told me sooner. We've been thinking about bringing in a consultant to streamline our vendor management systems. You interested?" That conversation led to my first client. Midwest Steel hired me to audit their accounts payable process and implement some of the automation techniques I'd developed at Hartwell. $12,000 for a 3-month engagement. Not bad for my first week as a consultant. Meanwhile, back at Hartwell, Austin was discovering that running operations wasn't just about having good PowerPoint skills. The monthly vendor reconciliation was due, a process where we compared our purchase orders against delivered goods against invoiced amounts. I'd automated about 70% of it, but the other 30% required manual review because vendors kept changing their formats. Our ERP system had quirks, and sometimes truck drivers just wrote the wrong numbers on delivery receipts. Austin tried to run my automation scripts, but they failed because he didn't know about the manual pre-processing steps. The script expected data in a specific format, but half our vendors had switched formats since I'd last updated the code. He spent 2 days trying to debug it before giving up and just paying every invoice without reconciliation. By the end of the second week, 3 more vendors had contacted me directly asking if I was still handling their accounts. Word travels fast in the manufacturing world, especially when payments start getting delayed or processed incorrectly. Austin posted another Instagram story from his office. Same ring light setup, but now he looked stressed. Caption read something about learning the ropes and diving deep into operations. The comments were mostly from his MBA classmates telling him how awesome he was, if they only knew. The funny thing was, Michael still thought everything was under control. Austin was keeping up appearances, sending daily emails about optimizing workflows and implementing best practices. What he wasn't mentioning was that those optimizations were breaking more things than they fixed, and those best practices were causing compliance headaches that wouldn't show up for another month or 2. But I knew they were coming. In the Army, we learned that systems failures don't happen all at once. They cascade. One small problem leads to another, until the whole operation grinds to a halt. Austin was creating those small problems faster than he could identify them, let alone fix them. I just had to be patient and let gravity do its work. Month 2 was when the real damage started showing. Austin had managed to break our vendor payment system trying to streamline it over a weekend. Kid watched some YouTube videos about process optimization and decided our payment approval workflow was too complicated, so he deleted half the verification steps. Monday morning, 3 suppliers called asking why their payments were 2 weeks overdue. Turns out Austin's streamlined system had been approving payments that never actually got processed. The invoices just sat in some digital limbo he'd accidentally created. Took Gary from IT 3 days to figure out where the payments had gone and another week to process them manually. That's when Hartwell lost their first major client. Richardson Manufacturing had been with us for 8 years. Solid relationship built on reliable deliveries and honest communication. When their procurement manager, Lisa Williams, called about a delayed shipment, Austin gave her some corporate speak about supply chain optimization and temporary processing delays. Lisa had heard that kind of talk before. It usually meant a company was in trouble. She pulled their contract the next day. $150,000 annual account, gone. Sent me a LinkedIn message the same afternoon. Bob, heard you're consulting now. We need someone who actually knows manufacturing operations. Interested? That turned into my second client. Richardson hired me to audit their existing supplier relationships and recommend improvements to their vendor management process. Another $15,000 project, plus they introduced me to 2 other companies in their network who needed similar work. Meanwhile, Austin was discovering that Instagram followers don't help when you're dealing with federal compliance audits. OSHA showed up for their annual safety inspection in early February. Routine stuff, but they wanted to see our updated chemical storage protocols, accident reporting procedures, and employee training records. I used to handle OSHA inspections in my sleep. Everything documented, filed properly, cross-referenced with the relevant regulations. Takes about 2 hours to gather all the paperwork and walk the inspector through our procedures. Austin spent 3 days running around the plant trying to find documentation that didn't exist in the format OSHA wanted. Our safety procedures were all there, but they were scattered across different systems, some in digital files, some in paper binders, some just in the heads of experienced workers who'd been doing things the same way for years. The inspector wasn't impressed, wrote up 6 violations for inadequate documentation and gave Hartwell 30 days to submit proper compliance reports. That triggered an automatic review by our insurance company, who promptly increased our liability premiums by 40%. Michael called me that afternoon. First time in 6 weeks. Bob, we've got a situation with the OSHA inspection. Austin's in over his head on the compliance stuff. Could you maybe come in for a day or two just to get us back on track? I work on retainer now, I told him. 3-month minimum, $12,000 monthly fee. Long pause. 12,000? Bob, that's more than we used to pay you in 3 months. That's right, but you used to get all my time and expertise. Now you get it when you pay for it, same as everyone else. Everyone else? I've got 4 clients now, Michael. Richardson Manufacturing, Midwest Steel, Industrial Components Corp., and Parker Hydraulics. All companies that value experience over MBA degrees. Another pause. We need to talk about this face to face. You can schedule a consultation. Standard rates apply. He hung up. That week, word really started spreading through the industry. Manufacturing is a small world. Procurement managers talk to each other. Vendors know which companies are easy to work with and which ones are headaches. When payments start getting delayed, when orders get processed wrong, when longtime employees suddenly aren't around anymore, people notice. Jim at Midwest Steel mentioned my consulting work to his counterpart at Great Lakes Bearing. That led to another project. Sarah at Hydraulic Supply recommended me to a company in Toledo who needed help implementing a new inventory management system. By March, I was turning down work because I couldn't handle it all myself. That's when I made my first real business decision. Hired Janet Rodriguez, one of the people Hartwell had laid off in January. Best production scheduler I'd ever worked with, 15 years of experience, let go because Austin needed to right-size the workforce. She jumped at the chance to work with me. Then I brought in Gary Walsh, maintenance supervisor who'd been at Hartwell for 12 years before getting cut in the second round of layoffs. Gary knew every machine on that floor like they were his own cars, could troubleshoot problems most engineers couldn't figure out with manuals and computers. We set up shop in my basement office and called ourselves McKenzie Industrial Consulting. Nothing fancy, but within 2 weeks we had 6 active projects and a waiting list of potential clients. The irony wasn't lost on me. Hartwell was laying off experienced people to cut costs while paying me triple my old salary to consult for their competitors. Austin was trying to run operations with an MBA and a ring light while I was building a business based on the exact expertise they'd decided they didn't need. But the best part was watching Austin's social media presence evolve. Early posts were all confidence and corporate buzzwords. By March, he was posting motivational quotes about learning through challenges and growth mindset. The comments from his MBA friends got more generic, more supportive but vague. People could sense something wasn't going right. End of March brought the quarterly numbers. Hartwell's revenue was down 18% from the previous year. Operating costs were up due to increased insurance, consultant fees, and inefficiencies Austin's optimizations had created. 2 more major clients had switched suppliers, citing service reliability concerns. The stock price dropped from $34 to $28. Not catastrophic yet, but enough to get the board's attention. Michael called another meeting with senior management. Word was, some uncomfortable questions were being asked about the operations changes. Austin wasn't invited to that meeting, but I was busy enough not to pay much attention. McKenzie Industrial Consulting was booked solid through June, with inquiries coming in faster than we could respond to them. Turns out, there was a lot of demand for people who actually knew how manufacturing operations worked in the real world, not just in PowerPoint presentations. By June, Hartwell was in full crisis mode. Austin had managed to crash their main inventory system during a routine update that turned out to be anything but routine. 3 days of downtime meant they couldn't process orders, couldn't track shipments, couldn't even tell customers what they had in stock. The final straw came when their biggest remaining client, Industrial Dynamics, pulled their contract after a shipment of hydraulic components arrived 2 weeks late with half the order missing. $280,000 annual account, gone. Their procurement director sent me an email the same day. Bob, we need reliable partners. What's your availability? That's when Michael showed up at my house. I saw his BMW pull into my driveway through the kitchen window. Same guy who'd walked into my office 5 months earlier like he owned the world, now sitting in his car for 10 minutes like he was working up the courage to knock. When I opened the door, he looked like he'd aged 2 years and 5 months. Tie loose, hair messed up, that corporate confidence completely gone. Bob, he said, we need to talk. I stepped aside, let him in, poured myself a whiskey. Seemed like that kind of conversation. Didn't offer him one. He sat on my couch like he was expecting it to collapse under him. Started talking about temporary setbacks, growing pains, Austin needing more time to adjust. All the corporate speak you use when you're trying not to admit you made a massive mistake. The board is asking questions, he finally said. Stock's down to $22. We've lost 30% of our major accounts. Insurance premiums are through the roof after the OSHA violations. And our operating costs are up 40% because we keep having to bring in consultants to fix things Austin breaks. I sipped my whiskey and waited. We need you back, Bob. Full salary restoration, better office, whatever it takes. I'm unavailable. Come on, be reasonable. This consulting thing is nice, but it's not a real career. You're 47 years old. You need stability, benefits, retirement planning. That's when I handed him the folder I'd prepared the week before. Annual report for McKinsey Industrial Consulting, 6 months in business. He opened it slow, like he was afraid of what he'd find inside. Revenue projections, client list, growth metrics. His face went through about 5 different expressions reading it. $380,000 in billable revenue? He looked up at me like I'd just claimed to be an astronaut. In 6 months? 8 active clients now. Booked solid through December. Janet and Gary are pulling down better money than they ever made at Hartwell. And we're thinking about hiring 2 more people. But this is... He stopped, stared at the numbers like they might change if he looked long enough. This is more than we paid you in 3 years. Those clients don't think I'm just some old guy who types on computers. They understand what 13 years of experience is worth. They know the difference between expertise and an MBA. Michael set the folder down on my coffee table like it weighed 50 pounds. What do you want me to tell the board? Tell them you gave away your entire institutional knowledge base to hire a social media influencer. Tell them you thought 13 years of custom systems and vendor relationships could be replaced by a kid with a ring light. Tell them exactly what happened. He left without another word. 2 weeks later, Hartwell announced Austin was leaving to pursue entrepreneurial opportunities. Corporate speak for, we can't fire the CEO's son, but we can make him disappear. Word was the board had given Michael an ultimatum: fix the operations mess or start looking for a new job himself. They brought in a consulting firm from Chicago to rebuild their systems. Cost them $200,000 over 4 months to recreate about half of what I'd built over 13 years. The other half, the vendor relationships, the institutional knowledge, the informal networks that made everything work, that was gone for good. By Christmas, Hartwell's stock had dropped to $18. They'd laid off another 35 people, closed their satellite office in Toledo, and were rumored to be exploring merger options. 3 more major clients had jumped ship, and their insurance company was threatening to drop coverage entirely unless they fixed their compliance issues. Meanwhile, McKinsey Industrial Consulting was thriving. We'd moved out of my basement into a proper office, hired 2 more consultants, and had a waiting list of potential clients. Industrial Dynamics became our biggest account, $85,000 annual retainer for ongoing operations consulting. Richardson Manufacturing referred us to 3 companies in their network. Midwest Steel brought us in to completely overhaul their vendor management systems. The best part wasn't the money, though. It was the respect. Vendors who used to treat me like just another employee now called me Mr. McKenzie. Clients asked for my opinion on strategy, not just technical fixes. After 13 years of being invisible, I was finally seen. 6 months later, I got a LinkedIn message from Austin. He was working at a startup in Austin, doing social media marketing for a tech company. The message was short. Hope you're doing well. Learned a lot from watching you work. Maybe we could grab coffee sometime and you could share some advice about operations management. I never replied. Some lessons you have to learn the hard way. These days, when young executives call me about optimizing their operations, I always ask the same question. Who's been keeping your systems running all these years? Because 9 times out of 10, they don't know. They think it's all automated, that modern software can handle everything. What they don't understand is that behind every smooth operation is someone like me. Someone who knows which vendor to call when the system glitches, which manual override to use when the automation fails, which relationships to nurture so your business keeps running when everyone else's falls apart. That knowledge can't be replaced by an MBA, can't be automated by software, and sure as hell can't be handed off to someone's kid just because they have the right last name. But they usually figure that out eventually, right around the time their stock price starts dropping and their clients start calling me.